Before much of Africa was carved apart by empires, before foreign flags spread across the continent, there stood a mountain kingdom that refused to kneel. Its name was Ethiopia. Ancient, proud, unbroken. For centuries, kingdoms rose and fell. Empires marched across deserts, crossed seas, and claimed nations as trophies. But Ethiopia endured. High in the rugged mountains of the Horn of Africa, emperors ruled from stone churches carved into earth, warriors guarded ancient frontiers, and a people carried the memory of kings, prophecy, and freedom. This was not merely a kingdom. It was a civilization. And when the age of European conquest arrived, Ethiopia was waiting. The 19th century brought a storm. Across Africa, powerful European nations raced to seize land. Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, Italy. One by one, ancient kingdoms fell under foreign rule. But Italy looked south and saw something it believed it could take. Ethiopia. A kingdom they underestimated. In the highlands, a new emperor rose. Menelik II. Strategist, warrior, unifier. He saw the empire coming before others did. And he prepared. While European powers believed Africa could be conquered with rifles and treaties, Menelik was building something they did not expect. An African empire armed for modern war. Weapons were purchased. Armies assembled. Regional rulers united. And when Italy tried to trap Ethiopia through deception, through a treaty designed to make the kingdom a protectorate, Menelik refused. There would be no submission. Only war. The mountains of Adwa. Dawn broke over the Ethiopian highlands. Mist rolled over the ridges. And below them, an army unlike Europe had imagined. Tens of thousands of Ethiopian warriors. Amhara, Oromo, Tigrayan. Forces from across the empire. Men and women. Nobles and peasants. United for one purpose. To defend freedom. The Italians believed they faced a weaker enemy. Instead, they marched into history. Gunfire thundered across the mountains. Spears met artillery. Rifles cracked through smoke. War cries echoed through stone valleys. And then, Italy broke. Its armies collapsed. Its generals were captured. Its imperial dream shattered. At Adwa, Africa had done the impossible. A European empire had been defeated by an African kingdom. The world stood stunned. Across colonized lands, whispers spread. Ethiopia resisted. Ethiopia won. Ethiopia remained free. But empires do not forget humiliation. The world had changed. The old empires wore new faces. Steel replaced spears. Aircraft replaced cavalry. War itself had become mechanized. And in Europe, a man obsessed with empire looked south. Benito Mussolini. He remembered Adwa. Or rather, Italy remembered. The humiliation. The defeat. The African kingdom that had shattered a European army. For decades, that wound festered. Now Mussolini promised revenge. Not merely conquest. Erasure. He would do what Italy had failed to do in 1896. He would break Ethiopia. In 1935, the invasion began. From Eritrea in the north. From Somaliland in the south. A two-front assault. Tanks rolled. Artillery thundered. Aircraft darkened the sky. And once again, Ethiopia stood against empire. But this war was different. The weapons were different. And the cruelty, far darker. Italian bombers struck soldiers and civilians alike. Villages burned. Fields were poisoned. And then came the gas. Mustard gas. Released from aircraft. Drifting over troops. Over rivers. Over farms. Over people who had never seen such horror. Men choked where they stood. Children fled clouds they could not outrun. Water became death. Rain became poison. The rules of war meant nothing. Empire had come without restraint. And still, Ethiopia resisted. Emperor Haile Selassie led forces in battle. Warriors fought with rifles, with old weapons, with whatever they had. But the pressure was relentless. Step by step, the invaders advanced. Then came 1936. The capital, Addis Ababa, fell. And the world believed Ethiopia was finished. Mussolini declared victory. Italy proclaimed a new empire. Foreign newspapers wrote of conquest. They said the ancient kingdom had fallen. But they were wrong. Because a nation is not conquered while its people still fight. Haile Selassie left Ethiopia, not in surrender, but to take the struggle before the world. At the League of Nations, he stood before powerful states, alone. An emperor without a throne, a nation under occupation. And he spoke, warned them. What is done to Ethiopia today will be done to others tomorrow. Many ignored him, but history would prove him right. Because fascism was not stopping in Africa. It was preparing to set the world on fire. And inside occupied Ethiopia, resistance was growing. The patriots, Arbanyak, men and women of the resistance, fighters in mountains, saboteurs in shadows, warriors who refused occupation. Italian forces controlled cities. But beyond those cities, the land remained defiant. Ambushes struck patrols. Supply lines vanished. Occupation bled slowly, painfully, constantly. Because Ethiopia was doing what it had always done, refusing to bow. Then, the world went to war. Suddenly, the occupiers were vulnerable. And in 1941, the moment came. Resistance forces rose. Allied troops advanced. Battles erupted across the highlands. Italian defenses cracked. Cities were retaken. And then, the emperor returned. Haile Selassie rode back into Addis Ababa. Not as a man restored by empire, but as the symbol of a kingdom that had survived it. Occupation ended. Italy was expelled. And Ethiopia stood again. Wounded. Scarred. But unconquered. Twice Italy had come. Twice Ethiopia endured. And now, the legend had grown. No longer only a kingdom of resistance, but a beacon. To Africans under colonial rule. To anti-fascists across the world. To all who believed empire could be challenged. Ethiopia had survived what was meant to destroy it. But history was moving forward. And soon, the kingdom that resisted domination would help inspire the liberation of an entire continent. The war was over. The occupiers were gone. The emperor had returned. But Ethiopia's story was no longer only Ethiopia's. It had become something larger. A symbol. Across Africa, millions still lived under colonial rule. European flags flew over ancient lands. Foreign governors ruled distant peoples. Freedom seemed impossible. But there was one nation they could point to. One nation that had resisted conquest. One nation that had defeated empire. One nation that had survived fascism. Ethiopia. And its name carried power. In villages. In cities. In whispered political meetings. In anti-colonial movements. Its victories became proof. Addis Ababa. Leaders from across a newly awakening continent gathered. Presidents. Prime ministers. Revolutionaries. Founders of nations. They came not to submit to empire, but to build an Africa beyond it. And there, in Ethiopia's capital, they created the Organization of African Unity, the predecessor of today's African Union. Its headquarters would remain in Addis Ababa. When African Unity sought a capital, it chose Ethiopia, because history mattered, memory mattered, resistance mattered, and Ethiopia had become part of the continent's political soul. But its influence reached even further. In the Caribbean, new spiritual movements looked to Ethiopia. Some saw in Emperor Haile Selassie a sacred figure. Others saw Ethiopia as Zion, a symbol of dignity after slavery. Its name echoed in songs, in prophecy, in resistance. Across generations, Ethiopia became woven into global Black consciousness. Not because it was perfect, not because its history lacked conflict, but because it endured, because it survived where others were conquered, because it proved another path was possible. And yet, history is never simple. The kingdom that resisted foreign domination also faced internal struggles, revolutions, famine, civil war, change. Because even symbols are shaped by turmoil. Even ancient kingdoms must confront modern storms. And still, through every upheaval, one truth endured. Ethiopia remained ancient, proud, unbroken. A nation older than empires that once sought to destroy it. And in that survival, there is a lesson. Power does not always belong to the invader. History does not always favor the empire. And freedom does not always fall before conquest. Sometimes, it stands in the mountains. Sometimes, it fights across centuries. Sometimes, it refuses to bow. And sometimes, it is called Ethiopia.